So now I'm going to walk you through a specific example, and I'm going to use the June 2019 A-Level Paper 1, which has got an article about Muhammad Ali, and it compares it with the Boxer Hanson review. So what I suggest you do right now is to pause this video and take a minute to go onto the Edexcel website. I'll pop a link in the comments and go straight to this exam paper and have a read of the edited article from the Telegraph about Muhammad Ali. I'm then going to talk you through the process, and I'm going to say how I went about it, but it'd be really useful for you to pause and identify the gap of that article, and also identify the big fish. So which kind of adjectives would you use to describe the type of voice that's created? So this is the question from that June 2019 paper. Compare the ways in which writers create a sense of voice as they reflect on boxing and its effects on the lives of those involved in sport. So what would be important first of all in answering this question is that you notice there are two aspects that you're being asked to note. So the reflection on boxing itself, but also the impact that boxing has on the men in this case who are involved in the sport. So these are the key bits of information that I was talking about that we get at the top of the exam paper. So we've been told this is an edited extract of an article. It's been written by a senior reporter, so that gives it a sense of prestige. It tells us that this is important. That was published in an online version of the Telegraph. Okay, so right-wing, broadsheet newspaper. Straight away we're going to be expecting a very formal piece of writing. In case you don't know who Muhammad Ali is, they've explained that to you. He's an American professional boxer and activist, and he's widely regarded as one of the most significant and celebrated sports figures of the 20th century. Now, when I've marked this paper, something that students have not noted is that this is in fact an obituary. It's not just a straightforward article. The audience is evidently going to be anybody who's interested in Muhammad Ali or boxing, but as you've read it, hopefully you've noticed it's about Parkinson's disease too. So you've got three quite specific audiences, but you've also got anybody who's reading the Telegraph online as well. So you've got quite a wide audience, particularly given that he's such a kind of celebrated figure from the 20th century. As soon as this article obituary opens, there's a very kind of solemn and somber tone of his life. So that very serious and somber tone reflects the fact that it's an obituary. We can see there's respect and reverence that comes through because he's described as having worldwide admiration. He's the superstar, okay, but that is muted with tragedy. Now there's a real balancing act that goes on in this obituary between a sense of kind of tragedy at the way that his life ended, but also at the same time reverence for the courage that he showed in dealing with Parkinson's disease as well. So in terms of identifying that big fish, the big picture of the voice, that's hopefully what you would be drawing from the article. And that's why I'm saying it's really important that you spend time going through and reading the text and making sure you really understand the kind of key messages of it before you start writing, because that really affects your kind of AO2 overall conceptual understanding of what's happening. In terms of the details, the little fish, okay, hopefully you notice that we've got this metaphor comparing his fight with Parkinson's to boxing, so his longest round, his longest bout, okay. And I would say one of the key drivers of this text as well is the use of kind of imagery, and that fits with the fact that it's quite a formal text that's been published in the Telegraph. I'm just going to move it down a little bit. So you can see as I've done my little 5-minute read through, I've put a few other pointers on there as well. This is obviously tragic when it's talking about the triad of effects of his physical deterioration. There's more imagery as well that creates a sense of poignancy. I could have written poignant next to this bit here, when he steps out of shadows to light the Olympic flame at the Atlantic Games. So fitting with the fact it's an obituary, there's this balance and the kind of physical deterioration. He went to light the Olympic flame, but his courage, and that's emphasized by this quote that we've got from Janet Evans, an American swimmer who handed in the torch. Now if you were going to look at this, you could also consider that this is a genre convention of an article. Whilst it's an obituary, that's the type of article. So you know, if you called it an article in the exam, exam you wouldn't be wrong, you just wouldn't be as precise as you could have been. This tragedy is reinforced with the way that it ravages his mind and body. At the end, I think this bit really summarises the voice of the overall article. So it's a tragic end to what had been a majestic life, but Ali appeared to acknowledge it would be in part be one of his own making. Okay, so there's that real balance there, isn't there, between the majesty of his achievements and his accomplishments, and his courage in facing Parkinson's is part of that too, and the tragedy, because obviously the fact that it tells you earlier on in the article, the fact that he's hit repeatedly in this tactic that he takes, the rope-a-dope technique, is part of what causes the brain damage. And it finishes with this very poignant quote from Ali himself, okay, when he's speaking in an interview. So that's what we're saying in terms of the big picture. What I'm going to talk to you next is about how I might then plan that and turn it into an essay. So I always tell my students to start off with a gap paragraph in the exam for paper 1, where you compare the genre, the audience and the purposes of both texts you've been presented with. So here we've got an obituary against a review. Now the audiences are quite similar, so we've got boxing fans are going to make up the audiences of both, but the review is actually of a piece of literature, so you've got kind of general fiction readers who might make up part of the audience, and you've got a more specific audience here too, those who are fans of Muhammad Ali or Parkinson's. So some similarities, some differences. If you can look at the subtleties, that's perfect. Now the purpose here is to reflect on Muhammad Ali's life, whereas the purpose of this one is to evaluate how effective and to appraise Boxer Handsome as a novel. So actually the purposes are the bit of these two texts that are really different, as well as the genres being different too. So I suppose the similarity comes in topic in the audiences, but in your analysis you want to pick out those differences in genre. And then we're going to think about the big fish, the big picture stuff. Okay, so in terms of the voice, the obituary is somber. The review is probably more focused on the violence and the brutality. Now, whilst there is violence and brutality in the obituary, it's always measured with that sense of kind of reverence and courage, because it's about a specific individual's death. So it needs to be more kind of respectful and poignant. Both celebrate, okay, so one celebrates the life of Muhammad Ali, another celebrates the accomplishment of the novel. But again, we could be a bit more sophisticated about that and say that the obituary is much more poignant, whereas the review is much more kind of simplistically positive, okay, and that comes down to the different purposes. Both are obviously considering the damaging consequences of the sport, but the obituary conveys more poignancy, more tragedy. So in terms of the little fish then, I would try and link the points from, actually let me zoom out, the points from my big picture analysis into the detailed analysis. So here in text 1, I'll be looking at the use of imagery, that we were talking about the fact that it's his longer spouse, that the disease has robbed him of his powers, he's come out of the shadows, okay, and that's all part of that somber tone. You've got lots of alliteration in the review and a semantic field of violence in the review, and often that alliteration is quite hard, plosive words, which gives it that feeling of violence. So that might be an interesting contrasting point. Both of them celebrate. You would look at maybe the noun phrases in the Muhammad Ali, the worldwide admiration, the superstar, and then you could look at the quotes from people as well to show that real celebration. Whereas the discourse structure of the review, where it opens and it praises Boxer Handsome and it ends summing up with that praise of Boxer Handsome too, establishes that difference. Both consider the damaging consequences of the sport. So again, you could look at the imagery and the physical effects that were personal to Ali. So I'd be looking at those triads, maybe looking at the syntax there. Whereas there's more of a kind of a semantic field of like boxing and violence, and fighting in Boxer Handsome. Okay, I hope that was useful to have a kind of specific modelled example, like walkthrough of how to approach the unseen text and then how to turn that into an essay plan.